American psychologist Abraham Maslow once made this statement: "We may define therapy as a search for value." My question to you is, have you found your value yet? I want you to think about that as we get ready to take off in this episode.
Welcome to Hazed Clarity, a podcast created for the oddities of the world. Tune in as I strive to walk by faith authentically and discover like minds to build up and unite a community of rare souls. Thank you for joining me. Now let's get into the episode.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. What's going on, everybody? My name is MrJaiHolliday, and you are now tuned in to the Hazed Clarity podcast. I want to thank you for tuning in, whether it be on your podcast platform or if you're watching on YouTube. I thank you. I appreciate you. I'm grateful for you. If you're on your podcast platform, please subscribe to the podcast. Hit like, hit share, tap some stars, write a review, drop a comment if you can. Do whatever is possible beyond the stream to show support, because it is helping us tremendously to extend our reach to all of the unique minds and rare souls that are striving to walk by faith authentically. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, hit like, hit share, drop a comment, and hit that bell so that way you receive the notifications for whenever we release an episode or an episode short. So that way you can stay up to speed and stay in step as we strive to walk in agreement in our faith authentically. Once again, I thank you. I appreciate you. I'm grateful for you. We are on episode 3, but before we dive into what I want to discuss in this episode, I want to take it back to episode 2 just for a second. I mentioned 4 books in the Bible that helped me to find peace and rest within my mind as I strive to walk in my faith authentically. But I don't think I fully identified each of those books and how they helped me to find my peace and my rest with God. So let me clarify those really quick. The book of Ecclesiastes is written by King Solomon, and I mentioned how many of the verses reference vanity, or in another translation, chasing the wind. For the book of Ecclesiastes, I use that as a source for perspective. Next, we have the book of Proverbs, also written by King Solomon, and we all know that as the book of wisdom, so that one's kind of self-explanatory. Third, we have the book of Psalms, or Psalm, however you want to say it. I say Psalms. But the book of Psalms, I referenced how it helped us to see that it is okay to feel something other than peace and joy and happiness, at least for a moment. So for the book of Psalms, I use that as a source of counsel and wisdom for my vulnerability. Finally, we have the book of Hebrews, which many reference as the Hall of Faith. And this particular book gives us a little more in-depth reading into some of our forefathers in the Old Testament. So for the book of Hebrews, I see that book as a source of mentorship, because how they walked in faith and righteousness is something that helps me to see how I could walk in faith and righteousness in my own life. Now that we have those 4 books clarified, let's take off in episode 3. I want to stay in the vein of mental health because we are in dire need of keeping ourselves in the right state of mind every single day, because the world is getting crazier and darker, seems like by the moment. So I want to stay in the mental health vein, or the mental check-in, at least for one more episode. This episode in particular, I have to follow the same cry that I had in season 1 and speak directly to my men, my brothers, sons, fathers, grandfathers, uncles, cousins, all of the men in faith that are meant to lead by example, lead in protection and provision over our families and households, to our communities, to our country, to the entire world. This is a cry to my men. Now, with that in mind, you already know how we get down. Before we can speak on any subject, we have to lay a foundation of Scripture. Now for episode 3, we're going to change it up a little bit because the first 2 episodes we used the New Living Translation. But for episode 3, we're going to use the New King James. And I have 4 scriptures that I would like to read to help lay that foundation that we need for this particular mental check-in. The first scripture that I want to read is Proverbs chapter 1, verse 5. And this verse reads, "A wise man will hear and increase learning, and a man of understanding will attain wise counsel." Next, we have another verse in the book of Proverbs, and we're going to go to chapter 11, verse 14. And this verse reads, "Where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in an abundance of counselors there is safety." Next, we have 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33. And this verse reads, "Do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits." Finally, we have the book of Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. And these scriptures read, "If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth." So with those 4 verses in mind, I believe you heard the one common word in many of the scriptures, if not all of them, and that word was counsel. So for episode 3, I want to title this, Christ and Counseling. Let's take off. So to kick off season 2, we decided to do a mental check-in to see where everybody was mentally, emotionally, spiritually, so that way we can get back on track with one another. So we decided to get our minds right, but then we also took the time to find out how to rest our minds right. As we continue to navigate our mental check-in and diving into the Word, this whole process will begin to not only uncover our talents, our skills, our abilities, our purpose, but it also reveals some things that we may not want to see or may not want to deal with. And that's what I want to dive into today, because as we stated before, life starts in the mind. Our thoughts become our emotions. Our thoughts and emotions become our words and our actions. All of that leads to our daily routines, our daily habits, our daily decisions, our patterns, and even our character. So as we dive into our mind a little bit further and we go beyond what it is that is positive, we have to deal with those negatives. For every light side of the coin, there's a dark side of the coin. But with God's light, we can expose it and get better from it. Having all of this in mind, we can easily recognize that with life starting in the mind, that is where much of our battles will take place as well. And if you read your Bible, we can easily recognize that that has been the attack since the beginning of time. Ever since the Garden of Eden, when the serpent spoke to Eve saying, "Did God really say?" He began mind games to get us to question what God said. And from that point on, since that fall, and God putting enmity between the opposition and the woman's seed, although he was speaking to Christ, the opposition takes that as an opportunity to try to destroy every seed that could come into this earth, specifically men, because we're seed bearers. And with the original fall in the garden and that attack on the woman's seed or men as seed bearers, we can see that attack that has taken place to try to destroy men from the physical all the way down to the mental and emotional and even the spiritual all throughout history. From the semi-genocides to the almost fully genocides, to slavery, to imprisonments, to war, to contention, to everything that causes division within the world. everything starts in the mind, because thoughts can become plots, schemes, strategies to either build up or tear down. Specifically for men, wanting to tear down the mind to keep us distracted with things that do not benefit us, that keep us away from purpose. There have been things that have been thrown our way for the sake of keeping us in a state of lacking focus, lacking consistency, but most of all, lacking identity. One of the main things has been word curses as far as what a man is and what masculinity is. Now, I won't dive into all of those, but one of the main ones that many of us have heard is men don't cry, or don't cry, you're acting like a girl. All the various word curses of that nature are things that have torn us down in our true identities as men and the masculine energy that we are meant to walk in every single day. Because of that mental attack, holding us down, holding us back, hindering us from being who we are called to be, that swinging of the pendulum has forced us and caused us to want to drastically swing to the opposite side of that pendulum, and it's resulted in flawed and broken mentalities, which results in misogyny, toxic masculinity, or, because of the division in families, excessive femininity. Now, you can find these things weaved all throughout history and decisions and patterns and behaviors and statistics that we can read in regards to the ups and downs of men in society, men in culture, the dynamics between men and women, men in business. Whatever study, whatever facet you want to look into, you can see these mental effects on everything that concerns men. And what made it come to the forefront of everything was our recent years dealing with the pandemic. Now, coupled with the pandemic was something that has been going on since the beginning of time, which is injustice. But the pandemic was something that really brought everything to the forefront and put a true spotlight on the mental struggles that we as men have. The pandemic and causing the shutdown around the world, causing us all to be isolated and quarantined in our homes or in our places of residency, it really brought a lot of things to the forefront. Specifically, a lot of the negatives that we had for so long refused to face or deal with. We saw a rise in many things that were not positive, from addictions and bad habits to strife and violence and even suicide. This pandemic showed the dark side of what it is to be a man without identity, to be a man without purpose. Being isolated into places that are supposed to be our safe havens really exposed how unsafe we are even in our own homes. And in that regard, because we refuse to deal with our issues, with our flaws, with our imperfections, being quarantined left us nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, nowhere to fly to, because we've gotten so comfortable with the flight in the fight or flight. And because of that, and that desire to escape, it left us within our four walls seeking an escape, which either introduced new vices or enhanced the vices that were already present. Our refusal to fight rather than take flight also exposed those that were around us when it comes to wanting to be built up when we have weak moments of not being able to do it ourselves. Along with the struggles of the pandemic, it also helped show that family would justify feelings rather than the practice that we need to be the men that we are called to be. And friends enabled bad decisions or bad behaviors rather than exhorting us to grow, to mature, to be better. Taking this time of solitude rather than these times of isolation to better ourselves, we actually burdened ourselves even further. That is why I read the scripture, evil company corrupts good habits, or another translation says bad company corrupts good character. If you're dealing with your brokenness, with your issues, with your flaws, your imperfections, and those around you are also dealing with their flaws, their imperfections, their issues, and you all collectively are trying to flight instead of fight, you're only going to enable those escape mechanisms that plagued us before the pandemic. And now we were stuck within them for basically 2 years. And once we were able to step back out into the world, we ran full-fledged into those vices that we were once battling with, which we also spoke about in season 1. Remember, the PPP lifestyle: power, positions, and possessions. The truth of the matter is, what we needed to do in those moments of solitude, first and foremost, is go to the Word, because the eternal wisdom of God is the greatest way for us to see our flaws and imperfections, as well as the processes of what we can do to eliminate those flaws and imperfections, or at least minimize them the best we can until we go on to eternity with God. But along with that, we refer back to the scriptures that we read earlier in regards to counsel. Because this is a mental check-in, one of the critical focuses for all of society has been counseling, mental health, therapy, things that concern the health of our minds and the improvement of our minds so that we can improve our lives. Now, for many men, that was also a word curse that was held over us for generation upon generation, because the idea of counseling or therapy was viewed as something for quote unquote crazy people. When the fact of the matter is, counseling is one of the best options for everyone, because we are all flawed, we are all imperfect, but we all need that wise counsel so that we can continue to grow, continue to mature, continue to shed the things that are not a part of who we truly are, so that we can flourish in our true identity, in our true purpose, in our true calling. When I think about counseling, I consider it the unbiased best friend. The reason why I give it that title or that identity is because a counselor has your best interests at heart, but they have no emotional ties to you, no longevity of history, no proximity to you other than your moments of interacting with them. But there's no in-depth ties to you as a person to sway their approach to your improvement mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And you can have spiritual counsel, which I hope you all have, or you all seek out in a pastor in a local church and community and small groups. But there are also professional counselors, professional therapists that can ask the questions that no family member and no friend can ask, that will push you into finding answers within you that you never would have found on your own or with your friends. Now, not all family is bad, not all friends are bad. However, given the way our society is going at this moment, many of us probably have a handful of people around us that call themselves friends, but they're actually hindrances and burdens to who we really are and who we are called to be within this life. Bad company corrupts good character. Evil company corrupts good habits. Rather than encouraging you to go to the club, go to happy hour, instead of escaping into substance abuse and physical interactions with someone that you are not eternally connected to, only delays dealing with the problems and issues that need to be dealt with for the sake of your future, for the sake of your identity and your purpose. Whereas counseling, the unbiased best friend, saves you in every aspect of your life. Because if you're in your word as often as possible and you're speaking to your counselor, or your therapist. They save you spiritually because they will confirm, correct, or comfort some of the things that you're dealing with on your own, intimately with God, or in your rest with God. Of course, if they help or save you, spiritually, the byproduct of that is it helps you mentally. Because as you're seeking God and you're reading his word, and you then have your counselor or your therapist discussing matters with you, it's then helping you to think about things differently, adjust your perspective, adjust your perception of things, which then strengthens you mentally to make better decisions, to create better patterns, and most of all, walk in your true identity. Of course, with that tag team effort of your spiritual and your mental self, it then helps your emotional self because, remember, when your thoughts are within those 8 categories that we spoke of in Philippians 4:8, when you're thinking about the right things, when you're thinking about things above and not things of the earth, you're then emotionally stable, which means you're at peace, you're filled with joy, you're filled with love, you have happiness, regardless of what's happening around you. That spiritual strength, that mental strength, and that emotional stability keeps you unwavered no matter the circumstances. Those 3 then lead to improvements in your physical. Because as you get your mind in order, as you get your mind right, as you rest your mind right, you'll want to follow suit with your body. Because what houses your mind? Your body, your physical. And you want to be in the best health possible as long as you have physical health internally. That will then translate externally, the same way your internal thinking reflects externally in your words and your actions. And the biggest of all, because it's a primary focus for so many people, or secondary focus, I should say, because primary should always be God. But the secondary focus and the 5th element of life that counseling helps you with is your finances. Because when you budget and factor in counseling into your spending habits, you then begin to eliminate those things that take away your finances because it was the routine desire to escape. Drinking, smoking, clubs, sex, all things that drain you of money faster than you make it. Whereas when you channel that money into your counseling and you focus on getting yourself better internally so that it translates externally, you decide to forego a lot of those external things that once took away your finances, which allows you to have provisions for other opportunities to continue bettering yourself and bettering those around you. And most of all, give to the foundations that built your life up in the first place. God's house, your own house, and counseling. You can consider counseling a house for you as well. Counseling, the unbiased best friend, is a way that can help all 5 elements of your life, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and financially. That leads to the abundance of improvement in your life because it then helps with you relationally, how you deal with people because you learn how to deal with yourself. Professionally, how you go about your day-to-day in your job or in your business improves who you are as an employee or as an employer. Counseling, the unbiased best friend. I cannot stress that enough. Someone who has an objective view of your flaws, of your imperfections, of your issues, of your struggles, of your battles, that can ask the right questions for you to find your own answers, which translates to you finding yourself. The word reveals who you are and all of the greatness that is meant for you. Counseling helps you to see what is in the way of that greatness coming to full force in your life. Christ and counseling. Now, I say this is for my men because we are meant to be the leaders in our homes, in our communities, in our nations, in the world. If we don't get our minds right, if we don't rest our minds right, if we don't have that counsel that provides safety and wisdom, we will continue to be burdened individually, and we will then continue this downward spiral that we see in society right now collectively, because none of us are thinking the right things. None of us are thinking on things above because we're too busy worried about things in the earth. Again, power, positions, possessions. Wanting to escape rather than fight and flourish. Counseling is needed. Many have broken the stigma. Many have broken out of that word curse and sought counseling. I myself have. I absolutely adore my counselor, because in those moments of asking the right questions, hearing perspective that was not my own, I was not only able to adjust my thinking, but I was also able to see how much I was on the right track in things that I did on my own time. Because that solitude was my intimacy with God, seeking His word, praying, fasting, praising, worshiping. Being with the one who created all things and holds all things together really helps you gain a perspective about yourself that gives you a focus and a desire to want to be the best you can possibly be. Couple that with a counselor or a therapist, you can't lose. You won't lose. Because when you're with God, nothing can defeat you. If God be for you, who can be against you? Man, that sounds good. I hope it sounds just as good to you as it does to me, because this entire perspective, this entire thought process has been what I've gone through the last several years, to be honest. And I'm still going through it. It's an ongoing process. This is a lifestyle. Walking by faith is a lifelong journey. Counseling will never end, because you will always need an additional or alternate perspective to make sure that you're not wise in your own eyes, to grow prideful, and then begin to misstep or be distracted. I hope that was as good for you as it was for me. I hope that my testimony and my perspective of the process that I've gone through over the last several years and continue to go through is something that benefits you, is something that stirs you and encourages you to seek counseling for yourself, whether it be online or in person. Counseling, the unbiased best friend, is a great way for you to work through the dark side of getting your mind right and resting your mind right. So that way your thinking can improve your emotions, your words, and your actions, so you can walk in your faith authentically. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Hazed Clarity Podcast. I thank you. I appreciate you. I'm grateful for you. If you want to connect with me beyond the podcast, you can connect with me on all social media platforms at Hazed Clarity, all together, HAZED CLARITY, and that's all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, all social media. If you want to connect outside of social media, you can reach me by email at hazedclarity@gmail.com. No dots, no dashes, hyphens, or underscores. hazedclarity@gmail.com. You can provide me your feedback, positive and negative, your constructive criticisms, your criticisms, your thoughts, your concerns, questions, conversations, testimonies, prayers, requests for prayers. Send them all, because once again, it all continues to grow me and sharpen me so that I may continue to serve through this platform and help build the community that the unique minds and rare souls and the oddities of faith truly need, so that we can continue to grow in our identity, but also grow within a community. Once again, I thank you. I appreciate you. I'm grateful for you. So until next time and until the next episode, I pray you have a good day, a good night, a good moment, a good life. And until the next episode, I'll see you when I see you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Hazed Clarity. Please don't forget to connect with me on all social media outlets, as well as your favorite podcast platforms. Let's continue to unify and build something special. Until next time, peace and blessings to you all.
Be safe, be smart, and let's get clear as we walk this journey of faith.